The year 2026 has become a battlefield for your attention. In this relentless pulse of the modern age, the world has fallen into a dangerous trap, the illusion that every piece of information is a gift, and every voice deserves an audience. We live in an era where silence is mistaken for ignorance and deep contemplation is seen as a waste of time. Look at the people around you, their eyes are glazed over, their fingers are constantly twitching on glass screens, and their minds are saturated with the screams of 8 billion strangers. This is not evolution, this is a systematic erosion of the human soul. Every time you engage in a trivial online debate, every time you refresh the news to see a tragedy you cannot change, and every time you feel the burning need to defend your ego against a faceless critic, you are giving away a piece of your life force. These are the invisible leeches of the modern age, sucking the creative marrow from your bones until you are nothing but an empty shell of reactions. You are being consumed by the noise, and the worst part is, you are paying for the privilege with your very existence. Christopher was once the high priest of this digital temple. In the suffocating grip of the metropolis, he was the man who prided himself on being connected. His office, a dark sanctuary of mahogany and flickering monitors, was where he waged war against the world's opinions. He believed that to be powerful, he had to be everywhere at once. He absorbed every market fluctuation, memorized every political scandal, and spent his nights in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for the next notification to tell him how to feel. His ego was fed by the idea that he was informed, but his spirit was starving. He had become a master of everything that didn't matter and a stranger to everything that did. One night, as the blue light of his screens reflected in his weary, bloodshot eyes, Christopher felt a sudden, sharp silence in his chest. It was the sound of his own purpose dying. He realized that for 10 years, he hadn't had a single original thought, he had only been a mirror for the world's chaos. That was the night he decided to die to the world so that he might finally live. He realized that being informed was just a sophisticated way of being distracted from his own greatness. Leaving the city was not a grand gesture, it was a desperate escape. Christopher didn't pack a bag, he didn't call his associates, he simply stepped out of his office, walked past his luxury car, and kept walking until the asphalt turned to dirt and the skyscrapers became distant needles on a poisoned horizon. He sought a place where the air didn't vibrate with Wi-Fi signals and human desperation. His journey took him through forgotten valleys and over jagged peaks where the wind spoke a language of ancient indifference. He was seeking the legendary Monastery of the Frozen Breath, a place whispered about in forbidden texts as the last outpost of the Silent Kings. As he climbed higher, the oxygen became a luxury, and the cold became a physical weight, stripping away the layers of his vanity. His mind, still habituated to the constant noise of the city, screamed in the silence. He suffered from information withdrawal, his brain reaching out for notifications that weren't there, like a ghost limb itching in the cold. Every phantom vibration of a phone that wasn't in his pocket felt like a needle in his consciousness, reminding him of how deeply the addiction had taken root. When he finally stood before the massive, iron-bound gates of the monastery, he was a broken man. His expensive suit was a rag, and his pride was a memory. An old monk, whose face was a map of 1,000 winters, stood at the threshold. Christopher began to recite his achievements, his knowledge, and the reasons why he deserved to be there. He spoke with the frantic energy of a man who still thought his story had value. The monk waited until Christopher ran out of breath, then leaned in and whispered words that felt like ice water in his veins. "You have spent your life filling a cup that has no bottom. You come here seeking wisdom, yet you are still carrying the garbage of the city in your pockets. Tell me, Christopher, with all this noise rattling in your skull, how can you ever hope to hear the whisper of the divine?" Without another word, the monk closed the heavy gates, leaving Christopher to spend his first night in the shadow of the mountain, alone with the terrifying thunder of his own thoughts. He realized then that his greatest enemy was not the world he left behind, but the echoes of it he still carried within him. The training of the frozen breath was not what Christopher expected. There were no scrolls to read, no lectures to attend, and no secrets whispered in dark corners. Instead, there was the agonizing practice of unlearning. For months, he was assigned the task of sitting by a frozen stream, watching the water move beneath the ice. If he tried to speak, he was ignored. If he tried to think of his old life, he was given more labor. The monks were teaching him the art of the void, the ability to let the world happen without needing to be a part of it. He learned that most of his anxieties were born from a false sense of responsibility to the world's chaos. He began to practice selective ignorance as if it were a martial art. He intentionally forgot the names of politicians, the prices of stocks, and the faces of those who had wronged him. He cleared the cluttered rooms of his mind, one by one, until there was nothing left but the cold, clean air of the mountain. He realized that a man who knows everything about the world but nothing about himself is a fool, while a man who knows himself and nothing of the world is a king. One afternoon, the old monk took Christopher to a high cliff where a golden eagle was nesting. Below them, in a muddy pond, thousands of frogs were croaking in a deafening, chaotic chorus. The monk pointed to the eagle, which sat in total, unmoving silence, eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "Do you see the eagle?" the monk asked. "It does not descend to argue with the frogs. It does not waste its breath explaining the sky to those who only know the mud. The eagle knows that its energy is sacred, and it is reserved for the hunt and the heights." This was the strategy of the golden eagle. Christopher understood that he had been a frog his entire life, croaking at other frogs about things that didn't matter. He saw that true power is the ability to walk through a crowd of people shouting your name and feel absolutely nothing. It is the discipline to see a headline designed to make you angry and choose to look at the clouds instead. He was no longer a victim of his environment, he was becoming the architect of his inner world. The final lesson was the most difficult, the strategy of the lion. A lion, the monk explained, is the king of the jungle not because of its strength alone, but because of its focus. A lion does not react to the buzzing of flies. It does not waste its claws on insects that bite its skin. It endures the minor irritations because it is focused on the greatness of the kill. Christopher looked at his past self, a man who had spent his life swatting at flies, exhausted and bleeding from 1,000 tiny bites. He vowed never to let a fly dictate his emotions again. He learned to filter reality through a lens of essentialism. If a piece of information did not help him grow, if it did not protect his peace, or if it did not serve his higher purpose, it was treated as if it did not exist. This was not a lack of intelligence, it was a surplus of wisdom. He was building a fortress around his soul, a place where only the beautiful and the true were allowed to enter. When Christopher finally descended the mountain and returned to the city of glass and steel, he was a ghost in the machine. He walked through the same streets where he once felt so much pressure, but now, he felt nothing but a calm indifference. People were still screaming, the screens were still flashing, and the air was still heavy with desperation, but none of it could touch him. He moved with the grace of a man who held a secret the world had forgotten. He had become the silent king. He no longer felt the need to be right, because he knew the truth. He no longer cared if he was understood, because he understood himself. He lived in the heart of the noise, yet he existed in total silence. He had mastered the ultimate human freedom, the power to choose what to ignore. He looked at the frantic masses and felt a deep, quiet pity. They were still slaves to the noise, while he had found the frequency of eternity. My friends, you are at a crossroads. The world will continue to demand your attention, your anger, and your time. It will try to convince you that you must be informed, that you must have an opinion, and that you must stay connected. But I tell you, the only way to win this game is to stop playing it. Build your own monastery within your mind. Practice the art of selective ignorance. Turn off the screens, silence the critics, and stop arguing with the frogs. Your energy is a divine gift, do not waste it on the trivialities of a dying world. Become the eagle. Become the lion. Become the master of your own silence. In a world that never stops talking, the man who learns to be deaf to the nonsense is the only one who truly hears the music of life. The gates of your own kingdom are waiting for you to close them against the noise. The question is, do you have the courage to be ignorant of the world so that you may finally know yourself? Remember, the noise is a choice. The silence is your birthright. As you move forward from this moment, ask yourself, is this worthy of my attention? If the answer is no, then let it vanish into the void. Do not explain, do not justify, and do not look back. Your silence is your shield, and your focus is your sword. Use them well, and you will find that the world has no power over a man who wants nothing from it. This is the path of the silent king. This is the path of Christopher. And now, it is the path that lies before you. Walk it with pride, walk it with purpose, and most importantly, walk it in silence. The world doesn't need more voices, it needs more people who have found their own. This is the end of the noise, and the beginning of your true life. Be still, be focused, and let the greatness within you finally be heard in the quiet of your soul.